Welcome back, guys. Andrew with A-Team Adventures. It's a sad day. The boat is in the shop. I had a little issue with my trim motor. I'm not quite sure what it is, but it's sagging. When there's kind of two stages on a trim. You'll get kind of when you're really trimming it down, it's slow and it trims it all the way down to get a hole shot, and then you bring it out of that and it goes a little faster up at the top. It's just sort of a slow sagging on me. So it's in the shop, but I figured, hey, I might as well bring you a video that I've been talking about for a while. I keep meaning to do it, about buzzbaits. So we're going to talk a little bit about buzzbaits. You know, as I've been fishing them, I've mentioned some of the things, but I figured, you know, I should probably just kind of put it all together in one video and give you what I do for buzzbaits. I'm not super, you know, technical. I like to keep it as much as I can. I like to keep it pretty simple, straightforward. I don't get too crazy and wound up about it, but I really enjoy fishing them. And probably, you know, some of you out there probably have so much more knowledge than I do. I've been fishing them for just a few years now, very seriously. I've fished a buzzbait for, you know, whatever, 10 years, but, you know, seriously, just in the last probably 3 or 4, I've really been sort of, you know, playing with the buzzbait a lot more. So I've got a few. I don't have one that I'm like, okay, this is it. It's the only buzzbait that I fish. I've got a couple Strike Kings that I use, and I've caught a ton of fish on them. Another Strike King. I've got, I don't even remember what this one is. It's a light, you know, very light. I don't use it a lot other than when I'm in super shallow water. I've got a couple War Eagles. They make a halfway decent buzzbait. And then I've got a Roland Martins. I'm really liking this one. I'm gonna definitely need to pick up a few more, but you know, I just keep trying them and seeing if I find something I like. You're gonna see you know, I've taken the skirts. I pretty much take the skirts off of all mine. This one I left on, but I'm gonna swap it out anyway. This one's brand new. I actually haven't fished it. I threw a trailer hook on it, but I'm not gonna fish it with the skirt. We're gonna take that off. But anyway, so they typically come with a skirt. I'm stripping the skirt right off and then feeding something else on it. The Roland Martins I really like because it's designed to go very, very slowly. I think it advertises like the slowest buzzbait ever or something. I'm not sure if that's accurate, but for my purposes, it is quite helpful to have a very, very slow buzzbait. And I'm realizing I probably wasn't holding those up for you, so I'll hold them up a little bit higher for you. But it is a very slow buzzbait, and in the springtime, that can be deadly. I'm not saying all the time you want to fish a buzzbait slow, but for me, in the springtime, slow is important. They're not going to come that far for it, so having a buzzbait that you can wind very, very slowly is a very good thing. So I guess let's start off with maybe what I do to it. So a buzzbait like this, I'm going to jerk the skirt right off this. I'm just going to throw it out. I don't even need it. And then I'm going to take my pliers. Some of these are already done this way, but if you see right here, this one is loose. This little stop. And I don't really particularly like that. I want it to be firm, clamped down, and I'll tell you why. I tend to think there's some validity to it. Some of you might disagree with me, but I had actually read a book by Kevin Van Dam, and he was talking about buzzbaits, and he said that he thinks one of the key things in a buzzbait is getting that perfect squeak. Sometimes this one doesn't have it yet, but you'll be fishing them, and I don't know, this one might. Yeah, this one, you probably can't really hear it, but this one, in the water, it has a beautiful squeak to it. Yeah, you can just sort of hear it when it slows down. But in the water, it really squeaks. I mean, eat, 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 sort of like nails on a chalkboard, awful. But he was convinced that it was partly that squeak that got you those bites because they were so annoyed with the bait. They would attack it just to kill it and stop the noise. And that makes sense to me. You know, if you do, you hear, you know, some child making some awful, awful noise. or nails on a chalkboard for that matter. You're just wanting it to stop. You don't really care how it stops, you just want it to stop. Please. Your kid's screaming in the middle of the night, and if you just want it to stop. You'd like to think you have a better motive, like you want to care for them and all that, but sometimes, you know, it's 2 in the morning or whatever, you're low on sleep, you just want the noise to stop. And so I think sometimes fishing, that squeak is important, and they just want it to stop. So number one, I will pinch it down so it doesn't move. And then number two, sometimes, not always, but sometimes if I have way too much time on my hands and I'm dubbing around, I'll take it as a sanding block, but just a piece of sandpaper, and that little part in here, I'm gonna just run my sandpaper on it, just scuff it up so that the sheen is gone. And I'm just gonna kind of work my way around it. And I'm gonna try to do the same thing with the metal, you know, the metal in here, and just scuff it up, you know, just a little bit, and just work my way around it. It's usually aluminum or just very light steel. Sometimes these blades are just light steel, but this usually is aluminum. And you can just kind of scuff them up, and they'll get a little bit of a squeak to them faster. And I find that, you know, to me, it does seem to make sense. It makes a difference. I know there are plastic models out there. Well, you're not going to get any squeak out of that. And most likely, I haven't fished the plastic ones. I've heard good things about them, but from what I keep hearing is it's a shallow water buzzbait more often than not. It's a shallow water buzzbait, which would make sense to me, that if it's in really shallow water, I mean, you're not talking a lot of water, maybe you don't want that, you know, 24-piece brass band coming by. I mean, you know, they can hear this thing from a mile away. Maybe that's not necessary. Something a little more subtle might be more helpful. But in most of the stuff that I do, I think the squeak helps me and gets me a few extra bites. It makes sense to me why that would be. We know we can annoy fish. It's like when you're poking somebody and you just keep poking them. Eventually, they're going to react. Eventually, they're going to have enough. And so I think that squeak could be a little bit like that. It's just someone just poking you, and you say, that's it, I've had it, you know, and you go after them. So number one, pull the skirt off. I pinch that down if it's not pinched down already. And then I'm gonna just sand it up just a little bit sometimes. Again, if I have way too much time on my hands, I'm gonna sand it up just a little bit. In the springtime, I will often, like this, well, here's a good example. This one I've caught a lot of fish on. It's time to replace the horny toad, but I've pulled the skirt off. In the springtime, I'll often fish a trailer hook. It's getting to that point now. The water's, you know, 70 to 70. I even saw it yesterday. I was fishing a buzzbait, and it was 79-degree water temperature, which is hot for us already. But I took the trailer hook right off. They were eating it really, really well. And then sometimes the trailer hook just gets in the way, and I find that, you know, it gets hung up more in weeds or logs or anything like that that you're fishing it in, because you can run this through some pretty nasty stuff, especially, you know, in the springtime. There isn't as much emergent weeds, and you can get away fishing this through some really shallow water and some kind of nasty stuff. There isn't the slime. The slime, you know, kind of ruins it, but there isn't the slime yet. And so I just take the trailer hook off, and then I'm just fishing, you know, the horny toad and going with it. But that's what I'll usually do. I pinch it down. Sometimes in the spring, put a trailer hook on, and I like to keep that rubber, you know, kind of up a little ways. That lets that hook really move. If you've got this thing pinched all the way down, well, it's trapped right down. A fish goes to hit it, and it's not going to move out of the way so much and get it. But here, it can kind of move out of the way. If they really attack that thing, well, this hook collapses in, and they can get this one real good. So I kind of like that rubber up there a little ways. Then I will, you know, again, I fish a horny toad a lot, a white one. I've got, you know, 3 different I'll use. I use a black one the most, so there's a black horny toad, and I'm going to just cut off the first 1/4 inch or so, and then when I fish that on there, okay, let's just pretend like I'm going to do this one. You know, let's say I'm going to pretend like here, I'll go ahead. There we go. Bite off that first top little bit. I'm going to fish this on. Okay. And then I'd take a couple drops of super glue. I'd super glue it and just stick it just in like that. And that would be that. That would be the end of it. And I get that a little crooked. I'd probably make that a little straighter, but you know, something just like that, and I'd fish that bait just like that. And the black one is probably the one that I use the most, followed by the white one. And then every once in a while, it seems like they want something with a little chartreuse or something in it. And so I'll fish this one, and I've done very well. There are days when I've done really, really well with the chartreuse. But day in and day out, I a lot of confidence in the black. And if it's really clear water, I will tend to pair down to a Kitech, something like that. And something very natural. I'm usually not fishing a Kitech with some crazy bold color. I'm using it because I need it to look super natural. And we're usually fishing very shallow, very clear water. And I will usually have multiple buzzbait rods, at least 2 rigged up at any given time. So I'll mess around with, whichever one I think is going to be best. If it's clear water, I'm going to start with this one to begin with. If it's dirtier water, well, I've got this one rigged up, and I'm going to start with, this has got a big blade, gold, because usually in dingier water the gold works better, and I've got a black horny toad on it. And I'm going to start, if it's dingier water, I'm going to start with that right off the bat. But then I'll start modifying. So if I'm getting a lot of short strikes, if they're just absolutely clobbering it, I'm probably just going to stick with it. But if they're short striking it and nipping at it or whatever, where I don't feel like I'm getting as many bites as I think I should be getting, I'm going to swap to this one. And then, speaking of that, this happened just the other day. I was getting bites on the black one. It was pretty clear water still. Well, there was a little stain. I think that's why I picked it up to start with. There was a little stain, but I started getting bites on this, and I put a few good ones in the boat. And then I thought, you know what? There's probably more fish here. So I actually picked up another buzzbait, just a different one, and started winding this around. And they started destroying this. And we got in super skinny water. A foot or less. I was casting it. I couldn't even get up there with the boat. I was casting it way up in there and winding it back as slow as I could. And they were clobbering that bait. And so, just swapping from bait to bait. Hey, buddy. But anyway, swapping from bait to bait sometimes gets you extra bites too. So I kind of went back and forth, and I'd get 4 or 5 bites with this. I'd go back to the other one, get 1 or 2 more, and then I'd move and I'd be fishing the other one, get a couple bites, and then I'd swap to this one and get a few more. So sometimes, again, swapping baits, we've talked about that before, but staying on the same spot and swapping baits really pays off. And I think I moved 50 yards in an hour and a half and caught 15, 20 fish, and all of them were good ones. So it sometimes pays to really soak an area and swap back and forth. And if I wanted to, maybe I could have gone to another bait, but I was really enjoying fishing the buzzbait, so I didn't even bother. And I felt like at that point I had caught a lot of the fish that were there, so I didn't feel like I needed to swap to a whole new bait, just a different buzzbait. So that's sort of the basics, but again, I rarely fish a skirt and I rarely fish a trailer hook past the spring. The springtime is a special time. It seems like it's a time when most people miss catching fish on a buzzbait. You'll get, it's pre-spawn still typically when I'm getting my first really good buzzbait bites. And it seems like it comes into play before a frog. I love catching fish on a frog, but I will be crushing them on a buzzbait and getting nipped at it with a frog. It seems like the trigger is you'll get a super shallow flat, and the main lake might be 50 something degrees. In that flat though, it's 5 to 10 degrees warmer. So when it's 55, it might be 65, or let's say it's 52 and it's 62 in the flat. It seems like that's really, really critical, a somewhat drastic difference when you're getting that first buzzbait bite, that drastic difference where it's a lot warmer in the flat, and maybe the far north end of a flat, to be really specific. So it's the far north end, so it's getting the most sun, and it's in a shallow flat. And that seems to be very critical for getting a real early season buzzbait bite. And I've done this for years now, where I'll be looking for it. And sometimes I'll try it a couple times before it'll even happen. But I'm just so itchy for that good buzzbait bite. So I sometimes will hit it a little early just looking for it. But that being said, it seems like those shallow flats, and when I'm talking shallow, usually 3 foot or less. That seems to be important too. When the water's still a little cold, you know, yeah, fish will move. If it's down here, it's not a big stretch to come right to here. But if they have to come 4, 5, 6, 7, 12 feet, they're not going to make that move. You're going to need a bait that gets down to them or a lot closer to them for them to come get it. But in a super skinny water, yeah, they'll come get it. And it seems like, you know, when they come get it, it's just like they come get it and pull it down. They don't, I mean, they're not attacking it. In the beginning, they're just kind of, and it just disappears. You know, just a little slurp, and they'll just suck it down. Don't expect some sort of, you know, smashing your bait. They're just going to come get it, and I'm usually pretty gentle with them. I'm winding it along, and sometimes I'll put in a quick turn roll or a pop, but mostly I'm just winding it along, and they'll shoot, and then I'll sort of give it to them, and then hit them with it. And then when I hit them, I really hit them. But I'm not, you know, the minute I see any sort of a V or a swirl, I'm not just gonna nail it. I'll probably jerk it right out of their mouth most times. But if I just kind of nice and easy, let them have it, and then hit them. But don't react too quickly. Give them just a half a second in the spring. It seems like as the water warms up, I mean, they clobber it and you want to hit them immediately, or they're spitting that bait back out. But it seems like in the spring, everything's a little more lethargic. Let's see here, rods, reels, line. I typically will throw it on 50-pound braid. That's what I typically just choose to throw it on. It's strong enough. It's, you know, big enough that if you're going, you can skip a buzzbait. That's the other cool thing about fishing, you know, something like a swim bait or a horny toad. It's flat enough that you can actually, hey buddy, making a lot of noise there. You can actually skip one of these under a dock or under branches or something, which is kind of slick about having, you know, something on it, you know, other than a skirt. The skirt, it's pretty well impossible to skip that because it's going to catch the blades and roll on you and not skip. But anyway, so 50-pound braid, it's big enough that you can skip it okay, and yet, you know, light enough that you can make a cast, but you can actually get those fish back out of cover because it's strong enough. I will fish it, like this one happens to be on 5-pound braid because this reel really had it set up for flipping grass. But I threw it on this rod and said, you know, I wanted one more set up for a buzzbait right now rather than flipping grass because we don't have that much of it. So 50, 65-pound braid, but 50 is what, if I was just choosing, that's what I'd set it up on. This one's more of a dedicated, you know, buzzbait rod, and it's 50-pound braid. I'm going to fish it on a faster reel. 7 to 1 is the slowest I'm going to go. That's a 7 to 1. And this is a 8.5 to 1, so a real fast reel. And honestly, I kind of prefer the 8.5, but you know, 7 to 1 is about as slow as I will possibly go on a buzzbait. Even if you're going real slow, you can just wind it slowly. You can just watch it. Buzzbaits tend to have a lean to them, so they'll when they lean, they'll walk left or walk right. You can tune them by turning, bending this back and forth. And so I always start with kind of as straight as in line this way, in line with the hook, and the top bending back and forth. So you can bend this and you can bend this. But I always start with everything straight up and down and in line with the hook, and then I mess with it from there. And if it's walking one direction to the other and I want it to run more straight, I'll start bending it back and forth until I get it just right. And let me think, sometimes you want it to go a certain direction. Let's say you're going down the shores on this side, and I want it, and I've got the boat off from the shore, but I want to run it tight to the shore. I might want it to walk to my right. So I'll bend it in such a way that it will walk to my right. Or if it's vice versa, I might want it to walk to the left. But most of the time I just set it up so it's running nice and straight. The rods, this one, the one that I use almost all the time is a 7-foot heavy. It's got quite a bit of tip. That seems important to me with a buzzbait. It's got quite a bit of tip, but a lot of backbound. So I think you could probably see that, but the tip is pretty bendable. And that just allows them to get it, but then I want the backbone because I am gonna just hammer that hook and wind them in the boat. The hooks on these are very good. I'm just going to wind them right in the boat. I'm not really playing with them. I'm not letting them, mess around and get in cover because it's usually shallow. There's weeds, there's trees, there's something. I don't want them to go down into that. So once I do hit them, I'm just going to wind them back to the boat. And I mean, pull them if I can get them right up on the surface and just wind them right across because I've got a high-speed reel. I'm just going to wind them right across and get them in the boat. And then I really like that one. I needed another one, and this is a rod I used to use for flipping. It's a good rod, but it's not super sensitive. That's the other thing. You don't need a super high-end rod for this. You don't need the most sensitive rod on the planet. If you want that, that's fine. It's lighter. It's probably easier to fish in that sense. But you don't need it to be super sensitive because you're going to see everything that's happening and you're going to feel it because it's right there on the surface. So this is another one right here. It's very tippy, but it's got a lot of backbound. So I thought, I'll use this one. It's a 7.5 heavy. This is a Temple Forks Outfitter. The other one was just a Cabela's Pro, rod. Nothing special. But this is a 7.5 heavy. Very tippy. It almost fishes more like a medium heavy, to be honest, and it works very well. It's a little long, but because it's got such a good tip, I can really put that where I want it and be gentle. There's times when I just want to make a really bomber cast. That's fine. It does that great with the extra length. But if you want to put it in someplace or skip it, you want something with a little bit of tip and sometimes shorter. But this one, for being a 7.5, it works really well for it. You can really set that in place and put it into cover gently and then wind it back, just like we're talking about with a creature bait or a spinner bait or something like that. You want that to just gently set in there. If you're casting to something specific, you want to gently set it in there and then just immediately start winding it back. So I typically engage my reel just a little bit, just as it's about to hit the bottom. I'm going to engage my reel so I can immediately start winding because, hey, most of what I'm fishing is a 1/2 ounce, sometimes a 3/8, but a 1/2 ounce is pretty typical. So it's going to sink. There's no way around it. It's going to sink. So you want to keep it right up on the surface because that's where they're going to eat it. If it goes subsurface, it's of no good. It's not helping you at all. So you want that on the surface. So I'll engage my reel just a little bit before it hits the water. All right, guys. Sorry about that. The camera died on me. I thought I had plenty of battery life left, and obviously I didn't. But we were we're almost done with this video. I'm looking at the time. It's gone longer than I thought it would. I guess there's a little bit more to it than just off the top of my head what I kind of expected. But we were just talking about setting that bait in gentle when you're casting it around cover. I think we've thoroughly covered that now. So I think this is about the wrap of the video here. We've talked about what I do to modify them, pinching it, sanding it slightly if I have a little extra time on my hands, taking the skirt off, throwing something else on it, a horny toad or a swim bait that we throw on it instead. I don't fish a skirt much. I only fish a trailer hook early in the season. Colors. I stick to pretty much 3 colors, black, white, and sometimes a slight chartreuse or that's 4, I guess, very natural swim bait trailer. The main is the swim bait trailer and the black horny toad, and then I'll go to a white, and then if I absolutely have to do something else, then I'll go to the semi-chartreuse looking horny toad. But really I stick to mostly three colors. And I start fishing it a little earlier than most in the spring, and I find I get just a killer bite, and people are always shocked when I tell them, oh yeah, it's pre-spawn and I'm catching them on a buzzbait, and they just you're kidding, right? Nope, there is a killer bite out there, and usually some pretty big fish that will go after these baits early in the spring. And then yes, I will continue to throw them all summer. Sometimes I find it's more of a early morning and late in the day thing, but every once in a while you'll get a day where it just goes all day, or you'll get it'll slow down, but you'll get some really big fish midday, sometime in the midday. So don't rule it out. We talked about the rods. We talked about the reels, a high-speed reel. We talked about the line being braid. And I guess maybe, I'm trying to think if there was one more thing that I was thinking of, and it had just come to me and now it's evading me. But if you have any questions, certainly leave comments down below. Ask your questions. If there's something I've missed, I'd love to cover it and answer that for you. I'm here to share with you the knowledge I've gained, and the goal is to learn everything we can, improve. That's just part of the game. So if there's something that I've missed that you are curious about, I would love to hear it, and we can continue to learn together. Well, thank you very much, guys. It was terrific to get to connect with you and share a little bit about what I do with a Buzzbait. Take care, guys.